everybody, and welcome to what I think might actually be the best episode of Sunday Sit-Downs today, the show where anything goes and nothing is left behind. And let me tell you, that is definitely the theme that we're going for today. I am Steve, Lawn Gnome, and I'm hoping that you're all comfortable. A late breakfast, a hot beverage. Seeing the title of this Sunday Sit-Down, it's called Living in Trump's America, because, just in case you didn't realize, we've officially hit the halfway point of President Trump's term in office. So I felt it would really be appropriate for the sake of seeing where we are today, because this is not about what he has been doing, what the world has been viewing as a whole via the eyes of the press. What I really wanted to do was find out what an average person, regardless of whether they are liberal, conservative, what have you. I just want to see how the last 2 years has shaped an average American citizen. And I am so grateful that I discovered these two gentlemen that are joining me today. They are from an amazing show on YouTube. They have their own individual channels, but they have an amazing show called People Are Terrible, where they talk about some of these interesting issues that people are headbutting with each other. So I want to welcome Jeremy and Caleb from People Are Terrible. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you so much for joining me on the season finale of Sunday Sit-Downs today.
Thank you for having us, man. We are very excited to be here and be terrible people.
Caleb, did you just call us average Americans?
Huh?
Did you hear that he just called us average Americans?
Yeah, I think we're a little below average. Always been what?
Based on the shows that I have seen, you guys, you're definitely above the cut there, and you guys have really. I'm just grateful to see that there are people that are willing to take risks on this platform that has been dealing with issues with censorship and free speech, because it doesn't matter what you believe in. We should be allowed to talk about these things no matter where we are, with whomever we want, because it was like I said the day after the midterms. If we don't talk to each other and we don't try to find a common ground in regards to anything political, then nobody truly wins. We're all losers. We have to talk.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a lot of what the problem is with politics today in general. I don't know that it's not by design, but it does seem like there's a lot of infighting, and that we firmly pick these camps. You know, we put ourselves into boxes, and then we end up feeling a personal attachment with this ideology that kind of all comes as like a you get it all pre-packaged together. And if you step across the line, then all of a sudden you are kind of cheating on your group or your team. And I don't think that that's positive. I don't think it's constructive. I really do think it takes trying to reconcile the fact that at the end of the day, we may have different politics, but like we all have the same base wants and desires and needs and all of that stuff. So we share so much more in common. And I think that's a important thing that doesn't get touched on enough.
I agree 100%. There's this weird thing of otherizing, and everyone's the enemy right now if they disagree with you. I always try to explain to people, a lot of times they want the same thing. I'll pull up just something random like healthcare. People want socialized healthcare. People want more capitalist healthcare system. At the end of the day, what both sides really want is better healthcare to save more people. That's what both sides want. We just see different ways of getting there. But people, instead of doing that, because it's easier to paint everyone like a villain in a movie. They're the bad guy, I'm the good guy. And it's a weird way of thinking to me.
Right. And I think and the other thing that I'm really glad about having the both of you here is because we actually have people that are at sides. I myself was a centrist liberal going against my family, and now I've officially become more of a conservative person, but I'm still open to hearing the liberal side. I mean, especially considering the fact that that's where my wife stands right now, and she's a classic liberal, and, happy wife, happy life. I don't want to destroy that relationship, so we always have those kinds of talks and debates. But the first question, because we got 7 questions as always, everybody, but we need 2 hours to go over all these questions. And I think that that's very important. So the first question that I want to ask you both is, as always, I like to begin at the beginning. So whoever wants to answer first, go right ahead, and then I'll give you guys my 2 cents. But the first question that I want to know was politics something that was always a talking point in your world? And if it wasn't, when did it become a part of your world? And how did you determine what side you wanted to be on?
Caleb, you want to take this one first?
Yeah, for me, I grew up in a family where it actually wasn't a huge talking point. I mean, we would just hear the very base things, like the platitudes, like the Democrats are for the poor, Republicans are for the rich, and those things. And then my parents would vote. My dad still to this day tends to be a little more conservative, which is funny because he used to be a pot smoking hippie with an afro who made bell bottoms out of a cut up American flag at one point in his life. And so he's more the conservative one. My mom tends to be, I would almost say, more apolitical, but she definitely has more liberal tendencies. For me, it wasn't a big talking point in our household. It wasn't until I got older, particularly end of high school, beginning of college, that I started reading a lot of books about politics. And I would do this thing where I'd read a liberal book and then a conservative book, and a liberal book and then a conservative book. And I just bounce back and forth between the two to try to come to my own terms. For me, when I started analyzing both sides, of course, there's a lot of dogmatic talk, but even back then, I felt there was a lot of more dogmatic talk on the left of not stepping out of line, even in literature. And the right, the more conservative, ultimately I'm more libertarian, but now is definitely a conservative viewpoint. The more conservative side just made a lot more sense of, I feel like I am a big proponent of the individual and not the collective. I'm definitely more on the capitalist side. As I've done all these readings, so I'm kind of a weird case where I didn't grow up listening to a specific side and then having that opinion because that's what my parents had or that's what the community around me had. I definitely grew up in a more liberal community, a pretty diverse community, but I feel grateful that I was able to dig through literature and really come to my own conclusion on what I liked. So I ended up falling right in a different way than I feel most people have ended up on either side.
That's a very good thing to hear. I mean, I really appreciate the fact that you try to see both sides, which is something that a lot of people, when it comes to politics, fails to do today. They don't want to hear the other side, and I think that that's wrong. I mean, you can disagree with the other side, but the most important thing is to hear the other side, because that will also give you a little bit more of an understanding of how you feel about a certain area. And it will even, dare I say it, give you a possible chance to maybe rethink your ideas and make sure that what you're doing is right. Because at the end of the day, what we really want is we want to make sure that we're good, decent people. Well, I don't know about everybody, but that's the way that I feel.
Yeah, for sure.
So Jeremy, how about yourself?
Yeah, it's first of all, I really do identify more socially liberal. I guess that's what liberalism is more concerned on the social side of things. I understand, fiscal conservatism. I think that there's a lot of value to that ideology and things like that. I tend to vote more Democratic. Caleb, you bring up an interesting dichotomy between the two parties, and that is that you're more, you align more with the individual than you do the group, which in a way is intellectually probably the better of the two options. But then there's also this part of me that wants to protect those that don't have the ability maybe to do it themselves. Now, there is going to be a lot of exploitation that comes along with that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I know that growing up, it was a point of conversation a lot, similar to Caleb's parents. My mom was more just supportive of what my dad's political ideology was. She wasn't necessarily as involved. He was definitely fired up about it a lot of times. And what he did instill in me, and also just kind of the music scene that I grew up with, getting into middle and high school and punk rock and things like that, like I've always had a general distrust for the government, like one way or the other. I think that there's a lot of corruption. I think that there's a lot of dishonesty and a lot of selfish things that go on, power moves that benefit them more than they benefit the American people. And that's just that's symptomatic of any power structure. I believe that once, you give some people unprecedented amount of power, they are going to inevitably use that power in a way that is for their own self-interest as opposed to the interest of the group. Capitalism is a system that I believe similar to communism and similar to socialism. It was born out of the idea that this is something that could work for society. And then as it goes along, you start to see the cracks in it and realize like, oh shit, this is a flawed system. There are absolutely problems with this. And I think that one thing about patriotism is that it ultimately blinds us from being able to criticize our own government. However, if people hold the Constitution preciously and people look to that as a guideline for the way that Americans should and do behave, then you got to support the fact that we have the freedom of speech and we have the freedom of press. And I think that that's something that is getting dangerously misconstrued right now, is that the press is a entity for spin, even though it is absolutely an opportunity to spin, especially in big news networks. There are lots of honest and truthful journalists out there with integrity that would put the truth over other things, so just generally I feel like it's dumb to be firmly planted in one side or the other. I didn't hear as much both sides of it in my own household. However, living in a predominantly conservative area, I did, and I see value in both sides of it, but I just tend to feel like, I want to stick up for the little guy, the person that can't fight for themselves. I kind of feel like it's our obligation as humanity to do that. But yeah, that's kind of my idea on it.
Right. That's a really good thing that you brought up. I really appreciate that, because I actually had a conversation with a fellow YouTuber where we actually discussed, communist ideas, socialist ideas, as well as capitalism. And one of the few things that we agreed with at the end of the day was either of these systems could work so much more efficiently if we got rid of the corruption. Yeah. And that's one of the few things that never seems to happen, because these higher ups, the top of the food chain, if you will, they're the ones that are always finding those ways to not receive their punishments. And that is something that I am extremely infuriated with. It doesn't matter. You see, at that point in time, there's no political party that you should even be supporting in regards to this. All in all, it's bad. And what's that famous line that everybody says? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the few things that they have to do is that when somebody gets into a mess like this and actually does commit this kind of crime, it doesn't matter how much, it doesn't matter if this guy has $4 trillion in his bank account. You committed a crime, and now you do the time. Why the hell am I talking in rhyme? This is not what I intended to do.
I like it. I think the whole show, we should just try to rhyme now.
Yay! This episode is brought to you by Dr. Seuss. But no, it's just like politics was always something that was predominant in my family, but it wasn't something that was discussed 24/7. Right. I always remember sitting around the dinner table and my dad would be talking about everything. And then every now and again, almost always, he would say, well, maybe if the president would just get his head out of his ass, we wouldn't be in this situation. So like politics was something that was there, but not predominant. But in regards to talking about it with my peers, I never, ever got involved in it. And I never really wanted to know about it. I think one of the things that I remember distinctly was when my grandmother, who is no longer here with us, she came to visit, and I was about to go out to work. And she said to me, because I was eating my breakfast at the kitchen, and there was a stack of the current newspaper of the day. And she said to me, Stephen, I'm really upset about this. How come you don't read the news in the morning? And I'm like, because I don't want to be in a bad mood for the rest of the day. And she said, and she then looked at me, and in about 2 seconds, she goes, I can respect that. But ironically, it was actually YouTube that got me so politically active, merely because of the fact that there was a video put up in the booktube community about someone who didn't agree with forced diversity. And this person got labeled as a white supremacist. And that was when political correctness started coming into my head. Social justice warriors started coming into my head. And then I started to do some research, and I was like, and I will admit this, I was sleeping under a proverbial rock for the last 8 years. I had no idea this was happening, and I got terrified. There were 3 days where I couldn't even sleep without the help of a sleeping pill. That's how terrified I was.
Oh, no.
This cannot continue in the direction. Now, I say this on my channel a lot when I bring up politics. I didn't vote in the presidential election. And the reason why is because when I vote for a president, I want to trust that person. If I don't trust you, you're not getting my vote. I didn't trust either of these candidates as far as I could possibly throw them. So I didn't want to vote. But when I saw the results, I actually breathed a sigh of relief, because conservative values needed to be back on the table. We needed to let them be explained and defined for people who didn't want to listen. And even though I feel that there are so many negative things that I could say amongst the positive things about the current president, the fact that these conservative values are now being attempted to be protected, I feel is a very important thing that is happening right now. I am more than willing to listen to the liberal sides of things, but it is amazing when the extremes on either side, and these people have no idea what the heck they're talking about, and they don't have any way to back up their sayings. If you can't back something up, don't speak. This is not silencing your freedom of speech, but if stupidity is if you're just going to be vomiting at the mouth with stupidity, it's not that we want to silence you. It's just you're going to regret what you said sometimes.
So is this symptomatic of the fact that it's the smallest minority speaking the loudest, or is this symptomatic of the fact that that certain news outlets and certain publications will trump this shit up? Like there will be 10 tweets that are contrarian to what the norm is, and then all of a sudden it's conflated to the fact that it's like a huge controversy, when the only reason why it's a huge controversy is because it was dictated in the headline that it was a huge controversy. You know what I mean?
I think it's a little of both, to be honest with you.
Sure.
I agree. I think it's a bit of both. I personally feel definitely it's I think for ratings and for I think some people more nefarious reasons of actually shaping their ideology and making sure they have people quote unquote in their camp, that they do spin stuff very much. I'll use an example that popped into my head recently from a major news outlet where I saw a clip of Trump praising, quote unquote, praising Robert E. Lee and people cheering. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. CNN tweeted out. So then I was like, but I don't trust liberal or conservative media at this point. So I went and found the clip on YouTube. And I was like, he wasn't praising Robert E. Lee. He was using Robert E. Lee to say, hey, this guy was a great general. He was a guy, he was kicking our butts, and we found someone even better. One of the best people who went on to be president. You see us Scrambled. I'm like, that's not what I didn't vote for Trump. As a conservative, I didn't get behind Trump either. I didn't actually vote either. This first presidential election I've never voted in since I've been able to vote. But at the same time, I feel like that is playing so much of it. And even though they issue a retraction later down the road, people don't see the retraction. People just see the original tweet or the original story, which in turn makes these people more tribal than they already were, because they literally think the president was out there praising Robert E. Lee and see this as proof he's a racist, because that's what they've been told.
At no time do I want to overgeneralize and say that I think all media is good. Like there's absolutely going to be corruption in any field, in any avenue, because people are ultimately we're flawed. We're gonna fuck up. We're gonna be susceptible to things that persuade us or push our moral compass in ways, and we're challenged at different times. You never know how you're going to react to a situation that you were never put in before. So I think that a lot of these people may be bought and paid for, but I do believe that there's always going to be those people out there that do have more integrity, that do hold themselves to a higher standard. And that, you know, if there was a cure for cancer, would they really hold it back, you know, because there's more money in the medicine? I would think that somebody would be altruistic enough to come out and say, hey, we found a cure for cancer. You know what I mean?
Don't even get me started on my attitude towards big pharma. I will say things that will make people's heads spin. Like I seriously, I never want to be classified as a crazy conspiracy theorist. Like, if anyone ever compared me to Alex Jones, I would hurt them. But I do believe that there is corruption in big pharma, and I do seriously believe that there are cures for things somewhere. What they are, I don't know. But do I think that if there are cures, that big pharma is holding them back for the sake of money and layoffs and medications? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's just because we're humans, and unfortunately, that's one of the major faults that I deal with in regards to my thoughts on capitalism.
100%.
Yeah, but I mean, I the only thing that I am curious about is, because one of the things I did actually want to bring up today was the fact that today we are actually commemorating the life and legacy of former President George H.W. Bush. He passed away yesterday. I wonder what it's going to be like when Donald Trump dies, because I feel that, like, it's not until the person dies that we actually get good things. So, like, are we going to get good things when President Trump dies? Or are because even if we did actually see some important positive things from his life, there's still going to be a bazillion people posting on Twitter saying, oh, thank God that white supremacist schmuck is dead.
I will say one thing further. I will say we will get good things about Trump when the next Republican president comes into office. You see this all the time. Joe Biden said McCain wanted to put you back in chains, all these horrible things. McCain, as soon as he was out of the main, out of running, and he was no longer a quote unquote threat, all of a sudden the left was like, oh, McCain's not that far right. No shit. But when I voted for McCain, I knew he wasn't. He had a lot of like more left-leaning policies. But they do this thing that once you see the pattern, for me, it's very evident that they will trash who's ever. Even now, people remember how much I hated Bush. Listen to the left now talk about Bush. I guess he wasn't that bad. Oh, he wasn't that bad. We got Trump.
Of course he's not. Of course he's not. Yeah. He's Michelle Obama's BFF now.
Exactly. And that's the thing. This is all politics. As soon as Trump gets out of the way, and we have, because it's probably going to be, you know, a liberal president, and then I'll go back to a conservative president. That's usually how these things work out. The next one, you'll start hearing that Trump, oh, he wasn't bad, but this new guy, he's really Hitler. We thought the last one was. This one really is. You'll see it. I'm calling you right now. We'll come back and you'll see it.
As far as, yeah.
Oh, I'm not going to say that that's not correct, but I will say that Donald Trump's got it. First of all, if anybody says I'm glad he's dead when he's dead, that's fucking gross. You shouldn't do that. So please, you know, that it's wrong to shame somebody who's deceased and can't defend themselves. That said, lowest approval rating of all time, lowest approval rating president of all time. I've got like 17 tabs open right now with different scandals that this man has been involved with since he became in office, to the point that we can't focus on it. I didn't want to come on here and strictly bash Trump because everybody else has got that under control. It's not constructive. There's not really any value in it. But a lot of the things that he claims to have done were kind of already, the pendulum was swinging in that direction anyways. So I've been trying to be objective and come up with some good things that he has done. And I mean, it's so hard to keep track of all of the things that happened under this administration.
Listen, Jeremy, just keep those tabs open because I'm pretty certain that they will come up in the conversation later. I mean, at this point in time, I think as a society, we're going so far downhill, and we'll elaborate on that a little bit more later. But at this point in time, I think we're going to be putting someone into office who will give Saturday Night Live the best sketches at this point in time. I think that's where we're heading. So anyway, let's get into the second question. And I want to talk about a very important year, and that is 2008. Obviously, we all know that that was the year that things changed to a certain degree, and we elected Barack Obama. And that was a very game-changing historical moment in our country. But based on the events that led up to that, where was your headspace when you voted in 2008? Because here's a couple of events that took place before this moment came up in our history that really did shape our country before Obama became our president. We had the Clinton impeachment scandal. We had the 2000 election. We had 9/11. We had Hurricane Katrina, and we had the Great Recession. So where was your headspace when it was McCain versus Obama? Jeremy, let's start with you.
Oh, that's a really all of the catalysts that you said leading up to it, I think, are very valid and do play a huge
absolutely
part in where society was at that time. I was swept up in the message of change. I did think that there was something progressive and something about the way that the world would perceive America if we could break out of that expectation, that thing that everybody expects that we are going to do. That said, I mean, is that superficial? Maybe. I thought he was a great and eloquent speaker, and I think that we hire these politicians hire. Yeah, you heard that correct. They are civil servants. They work for us.
Absolutely. Yes, they have jobs. Yes, they get paid for it.
I think that being a diplomat is a huge part of that, because policies only happen when people are willing to sit down at the table and have the constructive conversations. And if you're so bullish that your negotiation tactics are just to turn your nose up at people and to walk out of summits and all of these kind of things, it's not a good way to address. It's not a good way to handle that diplomatic aspect of it. So the fact that Obama was this really articulate, well-spoken, thoughtful, very deliberate person, and then the fact that he was an African-American that we were about to have as president, I thought that would signal an important shift in what the perception of America was. So I was all about it. That said, when he came into office, I was critical of him, because we tend to be more critical of the president, to Caleb's point, obviously when they're in office, because there's going to always be more scrutiny on them. There's always going to be people going through their records with a finer tooth comb, because these are the people that are responsible for making the decisions that affect the entire world. So when Obama was in office, there were a lot of great things that he did, but then behind the scenes with Guantanamo and a lot of things that are human rights issues that liberals are supposedly super place a lot of importance in, he was violating human rights in a lot of ways. The idea of, I mean, so anyways, my point is, I don't think any president should escape criticism or being held to this really high standard. And when Obama took office, I did kind of consider it a win. That said, I do feel like, there were, bad decisions made. I think overall it was a pretty good thing for the country. But yeah, I was definitely swept up in the message of change.
For me,
Right.
I voted against Obama twice. I voted for McCain, and I reluctantly voted for Romney. He wasn't really my guy. It's just I didn't like him. So, like I was saying, I started reading and being a lot for a lot of people. I've noticed, especially our age or younger, politics really began for them in 2008. I was a lot more politically aware. I saw the SJW. I saw the identity politics coming on the left. So I was already starting to be more anti-left at that point in time. I had some major issues with, and it's funny, one of my liberal friends actually wrote me on Facebook, and they're like, you called it with identity politics like 10 years ago. And I was like, I told you guys it was on the horizon. I told you, and you guys acted like I was this crazy right-wing nut. And the right, we'll get into identity politics. Right has our identity politics as well. But so I was very against him in a lot of ways, because he is a very elegant speaker. However, there were a lot of things that he did even during the presidential elections, the debates, like rolling his eyes and stuff and kind of scoffing, that I found very unpresidential at the time. I mean, granted, now looking back, he seems very presidential compared to what we have now. I mean, he's much more presidential, in my opinion, than Trump is in his way of speaking, in his manner of speaking. So I was against him for a couple of reasons. One is I was actually, believe it or not, I said race relations were going to be worse by the time he got out of office. I remember telling my wife, and to your viewers who haven't seen me, my wife is black. I remember we were I think we just started dating the first term. But I remember telling her, I think we'll get more looks 10 years from now, partially because of the rhetoric that he's doing up there of and it seems mild at the time, but I saw the writing on the wall of like pitting races against each other, and we definitely do get a lot more looks now. I feel like race relations were, from my personal standpoint, we got a lot less looks, we got a lot less comments about it. I was more accepted in black circles when I would go. She was more accepted in white circles. We can go. I do think Trump's escalated that as well. I'm not just completely putting this on the left. I think Trump has actually escalated that in quite a bit of a way. I just don't think the identity politics started underneath Trump. I think people are more aware of it now. So I voted against him. Looking back, there's things he did right. There's things he did wrong. I'm a firm believer of when I don't like a president and they do something that is good, I should say it is good. I feel like that's fair. When people just do this blanket statement, you see it. There's things that Obama did that were a little more conservative. Conservatives would be mad. There's things that Trump does now that when Obama did them, conservatives lost their damn mind. But now it's their guy, so. But that was my tangent.
Well, one of the more interesting things that I've actually, and my wife and I have discussed this, what was so impressive about Clinton and George W. Bush was there was bipartisan, there was a way for these two sides to actually reach across the aisle and try to get things done. Clinton figured out ways on how to unify the Democrats and Republicans in the Senate. George W. Bush did the exact same thing to a certain degree, not as efficiently as Clinton did, but for me, I voted for George W. Bush the second time around because I will quote a line from one of my favorite comedians, Louis Black. I knew I was getting shit one way or the other. The only difference was the smell, and I chose the more familiar smell. I just wanted him because we were in a war. We had to clean it up, et cetera, et cetera. But I voted for Obama in 2008 because, Jeremy, I wanted the change. I was so steamed by the Republican Party because they let the economy practically collapse under their feet. And that was where I really started to see the corruption and how it really hurt the middle class. 401ks, pensions, jobs were lost all across the board. And this was the point in time where I was finally starting to get into my own. I had money in the bank. I was hoping to find somebody to get married to and take the next step in life. And I had to take a step to the side because I almost lost everything. Sure. Because I happened to work in the industry that crippled the economy. I was working in finances. A 20-something-year-old kid is no longer going to be trusted by the average American. They're going to want to deal with someone who has more experience. So we were done. We were losing everything. My friend lost his job too, and we had to move back in with our parents. So I was furious, absolutely furious. And especially after a horrible event like 9/11, would I have voted for John McCain over Obama? Maybe if Sarah Palin never opened her mouth. That was his biggest mistake. He never should have asked her to be his running mate. I always said it should have been McCain and Rice. That would have been your 2008 president if McCain would have actually won the election. Condoleezza Rice would have been an amazing vice president, and dare I say it, if she was the vice president, she would have been the next president. And there we would have had our first female and first black president if it wasn't Barack Obama. And I think that that would have been a beautiful thing. But I voted for Obama because I just wanted the change. And at the end of Obama's 2 terms, I felt like Scotty from Eurotrip. The girls never came. The girls never came. I was freaking out. So I didn't see much change. I saw things get so much more complicated. It was harder for people like me to get affordable health care because I wasn't even able to get anything under the Affordable Health Care Act. I had to go on Medicaid. How does a 26-year-old have to file for Medicaid? That's disgusting. It's wrong. And then I saw the SJWs and the race relations, the tensions were really coming up with the police brutality and all the riots in all of these black communities all over the United States. And I was like, okay, maybe there was change. I was lost. I was confused. And when I saw that it was going to be Trump versus Clinton, I was like, oh, dear God, we're going to hell in a handbasket no matter who wins this election.
And isn't that because it's like it's troubling, or it's like the pendulum swings both ways. We get fed up with the government and we got such short-term memories that we forget what happened the cycle before. Do you think that we base this on our own personal experience, or do you base this on your own personal experience? Are we talking collectively? Because I wonder how much people's personal experience plays into their the narrative of national politics.
Well, that's why I specifically am asking you guys here today on this, because I am a firm believer in the individual. I feel that seeing what the average person has been dealing with is really going to give me an understanding, because as I said, off camera, that's one of the few reasons that we're in a mess, and we're going to get to that in just a couple of seconds. As a society, as a whole, we're in shambles. But if you take a look at each person one by one, some people are turning up roses. Some people are actually faring very well. And that's what I really think that, and I know it's not always right to focus on the individual, but I don't think it's right to focus on the collective either, because when you focus on the collective, everybody is the same. There are people that are going to have similar situations, but is everyone going to have the exact same situation? Maybe out of 100 times, you'll find 2 cases maximum.
Sure.
Now, people that are literally dealing with the exact same positives and the exact same negatives. I feel that I feel that focusing on the individual really gives us a stronger sense, even though some people might say it's not the way that we should be looking at things.
Yeah, it's good to know that I was kind of clarifying that for everybody involved, because I do think that there are always going to be people that are turning up roses, whether it be from the fact that they just now finished their degree and they're just now getting into the workforce. Maybe they got a raise at their job from their position to a new higher position. So success is inevitable. Like, it doesn't matter who the president is at the time. There's always going to be tens of thousands of people whose situations are better than they were before, just out of the way that life works. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Caleb, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm like you. I always think at the end of the day, I agree with Jeremy. This is someone we hire, and he's my employee. So of course I'm worried about my own income and my own thing. I do think there's personally, I'll go for personal experience. I have seen some movement under this current administration. I'm in a financially better spot than I've ever been. Part of the reason is I work with contractors. Contractors have completely told me that they're willing to buy products from me because of tax cuts, because of this. They have more money, and it's literally that whole like trickle down. It's economics. It's one of those things where they have more money freed up. My tax rate, I think, got cut from like 25 to 22%. So I'm also making more. I'm keeping more of my money, and I'm making more sales because these contractors are also keeping more of their money. And so for me personally, it is about the individual at the end of the day. And this is going to sound horrible. I'm worried of course I worry about the collective to an extent, but it's that famous old saying where they say, what's democracy? Democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner.
I never heard of that, actually. I like that.
Yeah, that's why we say we're a republic. We're a republic. We're not a democracy, because democracy is,
that's correct.
It's a scary thing. The reason we're a republic is we do want to protect the small man, the individual. If we were a democracy and it was all white people just voting for slavery, we would have probably never abolished slavery. I mean, eventually we would have, but so yeah, it's just one of those things that I feel like, and this is why we have so much problems, is the only way to properly look at it is from an individual standpoint. At the end of the day, you do need to worry about yourself and your family.
Yeah, I think that there's validity to that as well. I just wonder how much okay, from my personal experience, from president to president has had very little effect on how I'm living day to day. I'm going to be 100% honest. I don't know how much that varies from person to person, but it almost does feel like it's more about the representative of the people, not the representative of the person, and that's why I always come back to this idea of the collective, because we are the people. The nation can't be strong unless the people of the nation are strong. And yes, we need to focus on that as individuals. And if all of us as individuals rose to that occasion, the nation would be strong, right? So I do understand not wanting to dole out resources to people who aren't willing to contribute to society in a responsible way. Back to what you said way earlier that I thought was very valid, is that a lot of times liberals get caught up on the idea that illegal immigrants are immigrants. Yes, we are a melting pot. Yes, we are a nation of many, many peoples, but it doesn't mean that you can just be here illegally. Now, I do think that there's situations where I can understand, because if you are that person who's looking out for yourself and who's looking out for your family, sometimes breaking the law is more important than is less important than protecting the people you love. So I can.
Yes, it's that famous saying, like, you steal that loaf of bread to feed your starving family.
Right. And does that make it right? I'm not here to say one way or the other, but I'm empathetic to that person's plight. So I do kind of feel like, despite the fact that I don't feel it so much in my day-to-day, regardless of who the president is, there are people that are directly affected by it. Like, as you said about your insurance or not being able to get it, that's awful. But with the way that politics moves, with the way that our system of government is set up, you are never going to feel the effects of a president until they've left office, because it takes shit years to go through,
Right. That's why a lot of people were saying, like, the whole thing with the healthcare, we'll bring up the healthcare again, and then we'll go into the next questions. These people didn't start feeling the effects of the Affordable Care Act until Obama was leaving office. That was when the premiums were starting to skyrocket in some of those states.
Yeah.
So I totally see where you're coming from. So in regards to the third question, we're literally starting to touch upon these, but I want to go into, my wife is going to be so proud when I talk about how we're going to be bringing up the 3 important factors of a society that makes a functioning society / community, because she's a social studies teacher. I'd like to go into the 3 pillars of that with the both of you and see how it's been for you for the last 2 years. So let's start with socially. How have things been with your family, with your spouse, with your neighbor? How has it been?
You want to start this one off, Jeremy?
Oh, God. Yeah, I do. It has been more volatile than I've ever seen it before in my personal experience. 100%. Whether it's me trying, okay, so for example, when the election started, it got so toxic on my particular Facebook feed. I know a lot of people don't even use Facebook these days because it's become this place for toxicity among people you're supposed to give a crap about. Like, I'll fire off whatever I want on Twitter because I don't know those people, right? But on Facebook, it's like, these are your friends, your neighbors, your family, people you went to school with and all this. And it will get so toxic that people are unfriending each other and stuff over politics. And it's crazy. But what I do feel, and I I don't know, Caleb, and again, this is just more proposing the question than saying one way or the other, but I don't know if what Obama did was stoke those flames, or if what Obama did is expose the fact that those embers were burning underneath the whole time anyways. I think that that's a kind of chicken and the egg kind of debate. Maybe it is a little bit of both. It probably is a little bit of both, but I say that to say, unfortunately, a lot of the race stuff started with Clinton. He was supposedly a champion for the black community and ended up doing so much damage with his disparity in how he treated cocaine versus crack cocaine. He put so many blacks in prison, and that fallout. I mean, we saw the Rodney King thing in the 90s. It just like it started way before that. Obviously, Reagan did it with the war on drugs in the first place. So it's all kind of built on the backs of what happened before. And that's why it's really hard to say definitively what this president did versus what that president did, because everything is so, there's so many variables. There's so many different plates spinning at one time that it's hard to attribute it specifically to one thing. Anyways, all that said to say that I think that right now, there are many, many white people who feel disenfranchised, which I find fascinating, but I also think it's a byproduct of as you guys have said, SJWs, and what I consider to be the most extreme. Like if there's an alt-right, there's an alt-left. They are the most fringy, far out example of liberalism. The people who costed Democrats the election, the people who are responsible for what it is that people hate about liberals. I don't think that's representative of everybody. I think that's
Antifa.
a group. Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like right now there's this very tit for tat, us versus them thing going on, whether it's men and women, whether it's whites and blacks, whether it's the poor and the rich, whatever it is, there's this it's them versus us thing going on, rather than the like, we're all on this sinking ship together. We better start shoving some of the water out of this boat. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I agree.
For me, I kind of feel like, yes, I feel like, I don't know if it's really any more volatile for me personally, because I always lived in more liberal left-leaning state. So I actually feel like now I run into more people who actually have my opinion. Now, when like the past administration, I would get just as lambasted for saying anything remotely conservative, almost more so because I feel like conservatives were definitely more in the closet for the past, 10 years. There was a lot of conservatives in the closet who were afraid to step out into the light. So in my personal day-to-day life, I don't see it any more volatile than it has. I actually see it a little less because I see guys all the time at work now who are liberal, but they're not SJW. And something SJW will happen, they'll even be like, man, I'm liberal, but I don't stand for that. Which a long time ago, I would never say anything conservative at work or anything, even that could even be misconstrued as conservative. But I feel like on a public level, I do feel on my day-to-day life, I don't feel like it's any more volatile. I actually feel it's probably a little less on a national level, though I do feel like it's more volatile on both sides. I feel one of my problems with Trump is I feel like Trump uses a lot of leftist rhetoric tactics against the left. I don't believe in turning the right into the left as the answer to beat the left. I'm very much against the rhetoric. I feel like the rhetoric he does is very damaging in a lot of ways, just as much as I cannot think of her name. The lady who said, if you see conservative at a gas station, get up and run in their faces.
That's Maxine Waters.
Maxine Waters, thank you. Yeah,
we're talking about her later. Don't even get me started on her.
So I feel like the rhetoric I feel like there is this drumming up on both sides of liberal and conservative on a national level that is very volatile, and I feel will lead to making it more toxic in the future. Currently in my life, though, I don't feel like it's any more toxic than it used to be.
Well, for me, it's kind of a funny story. Because of the fact that I voted for Obama in 2008, my parents really turned me into the proverbial black sheep of the family. When they saw me after Trump getting elected, how pro-conservative I was, my sister said, oh, this is a passing fad. He'll go Democrat back right again. Just going to let everybody know right now, I officially have registered to vote, and I have done one thing that my family has not done. I am officially a registered Republican now. So that's me. Whatever I'll vote for is who I believe will actually be the better person for the job. But my wife said after the whole Trump election, this is not the man I married, because we were very much on the same wavelength in terms of very liberal views. But one of the few things that she always talks about, and we even saw a video from PragerU on YouTube about this, there's liberalism, and then there is leftism. There is a very big difference between those two. Liberals, true traditional classic liberals, are not the bad guys. They are people that are willing to find a common ground. It's the leftists that are the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. That was a metaphor I wanted to use a little bit later, but the problem is, it's a very small minority on both sides that are making the most noise. And the problem is it's the wrong group of people it's that wrong group of people that the people who hold the keys to the kingdom, the people in power, are listening to. They
Voice for the average person. That's what I find problematic about it on both sides, is why does Alex Jones get to be the voice for Republicans? And I'm kind of curious, like, is there going to need to be a reform for the Republican Party?
Oh,
and
geez,
who
knows?
Get on board with it? I mean, do you think that young people today are going to be drawn to this message, or do you think that they're going to be repelled by what they see in terms of what's going on the national stage?
I'll tell you the God's honest truth. In order to save the time that we have, I will say, let time tell it. No, but the thing is, like, I have a much stronger relationship with my family. I still have a very, very positive relationship with my wife. And I feel that the more we talk about it and the more I talk to the other side, the more I find my friendships getting stronger. Because even though I may not think like you, it doesn't mean that I don't appreciate you and I don't respect your values. I just don't have to agree with you. That's my attitude.
Yeah, I think that's 100% how it should be. I mean, I'm married to a woman who has different religious views to me. I have a weekly podcast with Jeremy who has different political views with me. I think not applying motive to people's values is a huge part. People too often apply motive to what they want rather than actually hearing the other side out.
Right, exactly. So I will start off with the next part of this question, and that, of course, is politically. So I will say this right now. I truthfully believe that Trump is a dumbass, and to his credit, he's never gonna be a presidential figure, because that's not who he is. He's a businessman. A businessman he is the true embodiment of the stereotypical businessman. It's just, here's the job. I'm going to go through hell or high water to get it done. That's what he is doing. That's not a president. That's just a businessman in the presidential seat. That's what he is. He's not the brightest crayon in the box, because every single time he goes one step forward, then he gets on Twitter and he takes 3 steps back. That's what he always does. But there's 2 things that we have to give him credit for. He has, whether you want to believe it or not, he has made the country smarter, more politically aware, and more politically active. And now I would say 90% of the country now actually wants to know, how does this thing work?
Fantastic.
And I have to applaud him for that, regardless, anything that he has done is people who really don't like him, but still want to be strong conservatives in the Republican Party, we're now actually seeing other Republican and conservative and Democrat, we're seeing other political figures in the spotlight. I will say that one of the Republican governors, not governor, I'm sorry, a senator, if he ran for president, he'd get my vote. I love Ben Sasse. I like him a lot. I think he's very smart. He's very well spoken. He seems to be someone that is willing to compromise. And that's the kind of guy that I would love to see as a president one day. On the Democratic side, there are some people that I actually do like, believe it or not, as well. I like Joe Manchin. I think that he can be a great leader as well, because I like he's one of the House representatives. He's been one of the guys who's been one of the House representatives for many years for Long Island, New York, Peter King. I think he's great. And whether they agree, or Mike Lee is another Republican senator that I like a lot too. So thanks to Trump, we're seeing a lot more of these hearings televised. So we're actually seeing who these people are, and we're seeing who are the true bad ones and who are the true good ones. Because I'll tell you one thing, now I know a little bit more about the following Democrats: Cory Booker, Kamala Harris, Maxine Waters, and the independent Bernie Sanders, or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the new representative for New York. Now I know who these people are, and I know for a solid fact, if some of these people want to put their hats into the presidential ring, I'm sorry, Democrats, Trump's going to be reelected in 2020, because truly respectable liberals and Democrats, you're not going to get the progressive extreme left vote. You're not going to get it. They don't want that. The reason why there were so many flips in the midterms is because the Democratic candidates that mostly won were classic moderate liberals, centrist liberals. They're the ones the country will vote for, not the extremes, not the progressives.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Caleb, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I'm hoping that, so I'm kind of the opposite of you, Steve. I actually left the Republican Party over Trump. So
Okay.
so I actually, that was my stance on it. I didn't like what he stood for. To me, he was a big government guy, which is not the reason. I'm actually probably closer to like libertarian or even classical liberal. I have a lot of classical liberal stances as well, which is weird that now it's almost a right-wing view to believe in some classical liberal viewpoints. A classical liberal that comes to mind is Dave Rubin. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dave Rubin.
I love Dave Rubin.
Yeah, I love Dave Rubin. He gets called alt-right now. I'm like, the gay Jew.
Love it.
You know, like really?
Even love him or hate him, even Milo Yiannopoulos, a gay Jewish man, you know,
a gay Jewish man married to a black man,
who was classified as a white supremacist. I just don't get how they come up with these conclusions.
But I'm hoping that one of my hopes that for Trump, I hope to see a growing center and more conversations like this. And I think that's one of the things that he has done that's good, is I've seen a lot of people become very disenfranchised with the left. And I do agree, there's a huge difference between left or progressive and liberal. Those are two different things. They're in the same wing, the same way that unfortunately there's white supremacists and alt-right in the right wing, but they don't represent me. So there are these two camps. But I feel like hopefully there'll be this return to a little more reaching across the aisle, very Bill Clinton-esque, where, I mean, you look back and he did welfare reform under Clinton. That's a very conservative thing that he reached across the aisle. You don't see that anymore. You haven't seen that for at least the last two presidents. You haven't seen it through Trump. You didn't see it through Obama. You saw very lightly through Bush,
which I did say.
Yeah, but that's about it. And I'm hoping that maybe you'll see people get a little disenfranchised, like myself, who got disenfranchised from the right. But that being said, I feel like the left strategy right now is to go, hey, you know, when we called you guys all racist, bigots, deplorables, and all that, and you guys got mad and voted for that crazy asshole, we're just going to double down on our crazy strategy. And people like myself who didn't vote for Trump is a likely vote for me in the next election. Not because I like Trump, because I do fear whatever craziness the left throws up to me is going to make me run into his arms. And keep in mind, I left the Republican Party over this man. And I'm hoping that if you give me a moderate Democrat, they will probably get my vote against Trump. I don't think they're going to throw that up, though.
Yeah, they won't. They at this point in time they won't, and that's what's really, and that's where they don't. And quite frankly, I don't think they care, because they seriously feel that if they don't go in the direction that they're going, then maybe they're afraid that someone on their side is going to be having an assassination attempt on their lives. I don't know. But anyway, everybody, I just wanted to just take a quick break. We're having an amazing conversation here. I really hope you're all enjoying this. We've hit the halfway point, which is not good because we still have so much to talk about in the next hour. But just as always, a reminder, this video will go down off of my channel so I can add an intro and outro, and it'll be put back up on the channel, which is tomorrow, Monday, December 3rd at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'm going to give these two gentlemen a link to this specific video file so they could post it on their channels as well, so you guys can find this if you're interested. And before we get into the next step of this one question, I classify myself as a conservative with a willingly liberal ear. I'm willing to listen to the other side and even find some agreement. And the last part about the third question is, how have things been over the last 2 years economically? And I will say that I think things have gotten better for me. My healthcare costs went down. My cost of living had a small raise at my job because of cost of living. And when Obama was president, it took me such a sluggish amount of time to build up my own personal wealth. But when Trump came into play, I saw my investments go through the roof. The tax cuts gave me more in my paycheck, and I am now a homeowner, married and a homeowner. I never thought I was ever going to finally reach this level after the recession. But am I happy with what he's doing in terms of trade talks? Let me say that it was really nice to see Mexico, Canada, and America come to the table last week and sign the new trade agreement. It's nice to see that there are some trade happenings with Europe. I am still not sure about China, but I'm hoping that this quote-unquote trade war will stop, because yes, I do believe America will get something. We will feel something. We will get hit. And the last thing that I want to see is the economy collapse again, because now we're seeing gas finally going down. People are paying less at the pump. People are spending more now for the holidays. We're seeing such great positive things. It would be wrong to shoot yourself in the foot. I mean, like, look, Trump, you could do it on Twitter, but when you're dealing with people's money, don't do anything foolish, because that's the main reason why people go to the voting booths. They vote with their pocketbooks almost all the time. People who don't have money, that's where the hurt comes. That's the pain. Money talks and bullshit walks. So if you're not going to make the American people money, you're not going to be voted back into office. And the part that terrifies me is if we have a Democrat elected who is pro-socialism, we are in serious, serious trouble. I'm just going to put that out there right now. That's my attitude about the last 2 years economically.
I can only speak from my personal experience about socialism, and that is that my wife's from Norway, and they have like the 4th best economy in the world, dude. Like, I don't understand what I don't see the demonization of that particular system as being very valid when you look at other socialist nations, and they seem to be doing economically like better than we are.
They never, no, but that's the funny thing. They are capitalist Scandinavian countries. They're capitalist, but they have more socialist programs. If you ask them, they will specifically say, we are not communist, we are not socialist, we are capitalist.
Isn't that the way that America would stay if we implemented more socialist programs?
You know something? At this rate, I don't necessarily think so. And I think it's also because of the fact that we are not as homogenous as a country like Norway. And I also feel that the problem is, my question is, if your wife is from Norway, I'd like to know how many people over there abuse the system. If we're going to accept and adapt some of these specific kinds of policies, I know that people will object to this. You got to track every single person. You got to put up a very strict set of rules. You got to put up a very strict set of boundaries. And if you break those rules, there's no second chance. You're out.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think I know I keep talking in very general terms about politics, and it's because specifically I have no idea what I'm talking about.
I think you're doing a great job so far, if you want my personal thoughts.
Well, I appreciate that. But no, my idea is that when you look at capitalism, you look at the Democratic Party, you look at the fact that they support a bigger government. They want more checks and balances. Lovely. I understand that philosophy. The Republican Party, they want smaller government because they don't want so much frivolous government spending going on and so many programs that are being exploited. Fantastic. I understand that. That makes perfect sense to me. Both these things make sense. But then you look at socialism and you look at communism. Problem with communism, if you consolidate too few people into power, they're going to abuse that power. If you've only got 5 people leading 5 million people, there's going to be a serious discrepancy between the way those people are living. You know what I mean? And then the problem with socialism is that you have to wait too long and that you're not getting the quality of help and services that you need because you're on this system that you're having to share with literally millions of other people. So you've either got the problem of government being too big on one side or government being too small on the other side. And either way, people are going to be getting taken advantage of. And that's just kind of the power structure, right?
And my other issue with things like communism and socialism is, as someone who feels that he is a strong individual and beats to the sound of his own drum, I feel that under a structured society like communism, there's no reason to even get up in the morning because everybody's paycheck is the same. I'm like, a doctor who tries to find ways to solve cancer and cure it makes the exact same amount of money as a check kid at Target. Why the hell would you want to be a doctor?
Well, I always do. For me, for like communism and socialism, there's always, especially communism, you hear this argument. Oh, communism's a great idea on paper. It's just never been implemented right. You've heard that a million times.
Yeah, like the New York Jets. They're great on paper, but then they suck when they go on the football field.
I always take that one step farther. I say communism is not great on paper. Communism is evil. Communism is an evil ideology. And communism says that we can steal your labor, we can steal your time, we can steal your money. That's what communism means. Now, socialism is a lighter version of that. And for me, the downside, I agree with what Jeremy said. Let's take healthcare as an example. You're allowed to have 3 things in healthcare, only 2 of which can go in at the same time. You either have quality healthcare, you have affordable healthcare, or you have fast healthcare. You cannot have all 3 of these things at the same time. I would love to live in a world where it happens. But in a socialist system, you don't get quality. You definitely don't get fast, but you get affordable. You're allowed to have maybe 1 or 2. In American, it's not very affordable, but you're going to get quality and you're going to get fast. As someone who's personally going through some medical issues right now, all my medical issues in an ideal world will be wrapped up by the first of the year. I found out about them end of last month. In a socialist system, this is something that could actually leave my wife a widow. But because I'm lucky enough to be in a capitalist medical system, I'm able to get, it's going to be expensive stuff, but I'm able to get this taken care of in a timely manner. And for me, socialism, I feel, has real world implications. I know somebody who used to live in Canada, and they used to, even though they have supposed great healthcare, they would drive down to Seattle, pay out of pocket to get their cancer treatment, just to make
Yeah.
sure that, that they could get it done in time, because they were on a 2-year waiting list, or a 1.5 year waiting list for cancer treatment. They're like, I'm going to be dead by the time I am able to go ahead and get into this. So there's things that I just tend to believe. I trust someone with a selfish motive of profit more than I trust someone, because if you're going to, in a truly capitalist system, we'll take LASIK, for example. The problem with our healthcare system right now, and I'm going on a tangent, the problem with our healthcare system right now is we already have a little bit of socialists with insurance and subsidizing for people and stuff. If we were allowed to be a more capitalist system, you would see healthcare costs drop. LASIK,
exactly. Competition.
Yep, LASIK, if you look at LASIK, is a microcosm of healthcare insurance. So LASIK is not covered, very rarely is it covered by insurance. LASIK has dropped in price and gotten better in quality so incredibly rapidly thanks to capitalism, because there's no insurance accepted at most of these places for LASIK, because there's no reason to. So you get people who look at that and go, okay, in order to beat the guy next door, I have to do it cheaper, or I have to do it better. One of the two options. And you're already seeing it get better. It's getting safer. While the price, I've had LASIK for both eyes for laser, and this was like 5 years ago. I paid like $4,000. The LASIK at one point in time was, even the blade one that was way more dangerous, was so expensive. So that's, for me, I don't even remember where we're going with the question, but why I end up a little more on the capitalist side.
Yeah. I railroaded this conversation. You were talking about economy, right, Stephen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Economy, I'm on board with right now. I mean, it's doing good. I think Trump says some dumb shit on Twitter that would definitely hurt our economy. I disagree with his tariff policy. I actually disagreed when Obama did his tariff policy on rubber, and now he wants to do it on aluminum and steel. I think it's a bad policy that could undo some good work. But I don't think he'll do it, because I feel Trump is one of these people. You don't listen to anything Trump says. You look at what Trump actually does after his advisors have kind of told him, hey, dude, you're saying dumb shit that won't work.
Right. Okay. So now we're going to start getting into the nitty gritty. So I hope you guys are ready for this. So I want to get your attitudes on a couple of things that both sides feel that they are at war on. So we're going to go into some. I hope that we won't really go too crazy about this, because we'll probably be here for the next week. Let's talk about a couple of things that we see being praised on the left that the right is not too thrilled about. Political correctness. The whole thing with the mainstream media. We see people like Maxine Waters doing what she's doing. We also see these social things, LGBTQ rights, Black Lives Matter, all of these important things that the left is supporting, but they're on war with at the right. Here is a way that we're going to start all this. Here's my complete, honest answer in regards to all of this. Especially when it comes to important things like Black Lives Matter and immigration. These are probably some of the hot button topics. The people who are making the biggest noise on the left about this, and I hope that this doesn't cause any issues with anybody, but I think that the loudest voices are the wrong voices. Especially for an important matter like Black Lives Matter, I find it so strange that the people who are asking for justice for the Black community are a bunch of undernourished, pasty-skinned, living in their parents' basements white kids who made bad decisions in college because they all decided to take underwater basket weaving, and they thought that they could get a job in it, and now they all have no money. They have nothing good going for them. So what do? I'm going to fight these social injustice causes. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think they're helping these communities. I think they're only making the situations for these communities who are already in terrible situations. I mean, dare I quote the president? Look what's happening in Chicago. This problem should be fixed by now. They should be trying to help these people with these gun issues and helping the Black community with their monetary situations. But they're not. And that's another problem that I have with the Democratic Party. They say they're on the side of the people, but they're not helping the people. Why are they not helping the people?
I'm curious to hear Jeremy's take, because me personally, as someone on the right, and I want to make no qualms about it. The right and conservatives have not been very good to the Black community for quite a long time.
That's true.
You know, I feel like they have done some things that were wrong. I also feel like the Democrats have too, absolutely. For me, I feel like these issues on the left are the same way that that spending is on the right. Spending is always a hot button issue when Republicans are not in office. They're always going to trim down that budget. They're always going to do it. And then Republicans get in office and they never, ever trim down budgets, very rarely. Democrats use these issues as to get motivate their base, the same way Republicans use gun issues, use economic issues to motivate their base and get into office. Issues like these, we had a completely Democratic controlled government for a long time. We didn't see any gun reform come in, you know, but now that they're not in power, they're going to drum up that, help them get back into power. Nothing's going to happen. Unfortunately, this is something I don't feel like is specific to the liberal or conservative. I feel like both sides use this to drum up their base personally. And I feel like that's what this is. It's virtuous signaling in order to drum up a base.
Yeah. I think the virtue signaling is a terrible thing, to be honest with you, because I feel that what it's doing is it's demonizing these minority groups, and it's not making them look as friendly as they should be. Because look, I don't really have a large circle of friends personally, but YouTube has been such a great place for me to find people of so many different backgrounds. I have Black friends here. I have Hispanic friends here. I have gay friends, trans friends. Like, I'm actually starting to talk to some of these people, and you know, when we talk about politics, and yes, we do, there is one thing that we all agree with, and that is the demonization of our people, regardless of who we are. And it's not right, because I have a friend who is gay and it's like, I'm an outcast because I have a straight friend. Like, that's just so strange. Like, these extremists that are demonizing these communities is an absolutely terrible thing. And again, neither the Republican or the Democratic Party is getting up on their soapbox, because my goodness, they're getting up on their soapboxes. I mean, Auntie Maxine basically says, if you see a Republican in a restaurant or a grocery store, you create a crowd. I'm like, get on your soapbox instead and say, talk to people and don't fight these people, because you might have more in common than you think. But no, we won't do that.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. On one hand, I think it's a gross overgeneralization to say all of the people that are advocating any specific movement aren't the people that are directly being affected by that issue. I think that a lot of the people who are on the front lines are even and who's to say who the wrong voice is? Because if the voice is loud enough that it catches the attention of the zeitgeist and people start having the discussion, it becomes more than the person who started that discussion. I mean, at least in my mind, at least that's the way that I approach that. Now, that said, I do believe that there are people in bubbles on both sides, people that don't have exposure to different kinds of people that grow up in extremely
I'm one of them.
situation, or people that grow up in an extremely poor situation. A lot of times they don't interact with the other groups quite as much. The people in the liberal camp tend to be the ones that come from, and this is also overgeneralization, I don't mean to speak in hyperbole, but a lot of times there are privileged liberal leftist people who will on one hand say that they are for the rights of blacks and equality and all of that, but will scoff when it's the first of the month and they have to deal with those kind of people in the bank. There's a lot of virtue signaling as this is the facade that I'm supposed to put out versus this is who I really am as a person. And I think, racism is systematic. I don't know that there is necessarily a solution within our generation of that, because this is something that has been set in motion for a very long time. And obviously I know that there's the nature and the nurture elements of it. So it's possible to rise out of that environment. It definitely is, but it's also easier to stay in that bubble and not have to mess with the other people. And that's why sometimes communities are so close. You look at any ethnic region, like if there's a huge Asian population, a lot of times those Asians are going to live within a certain area of each other because it's familiar to them, right? And that goes across the board. So there's a lot of things that are playing into this idea that liberalism is synonymous with democracy, and that these people who are so fringy and they want to add a new symbol to the LGBTQYZ, whatever the thing becomes, and it's all about inclusion, and I can be as crazy as I want to be and you've got to accept me. I don't think all of that is necessarily democratic. I just think it's just people who are I think that can exist outside of politics.
Jeremy, I do want to say this. You're right. It's not democratic. The problem is these people just seem to be always falling on that side of the political coin. That's the problem. If it was the other, quite frankly, I am surprised. No, I'm not surprised. All the stereotypical dumbassery is all on the right sides of the political coin. It's unfortunate, but unfortunately, that's the way it is right now. And is it going to change? Especially in this climate, all I'm saying is the people who have a more conservative mind. You know what? What you want to know what they said? I don't remember if it was on CNN or Fox News or whatever. It was on one of those two, but I agree. The Republican Party is going to get whiter, and the Democratic Party is going to get more browner, because that's what they're going to do. Because of the horrible climate we're in right now, that's where the divide is going, and that's the way it's going to be. Unfortunately, it's what we're seeing, and I think it's what we're going to see for a much longer period of time right now, until someone finally decides to say the right thing on their proverbial soapbox and say, people, wake the fuck up. We're all humans. Stop it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that's what's interesting right now is that a lot of times people treat racism and conservatism as if they're synonymous. Like if you are a Republican or if you are conservative, you are anti-minority. And I mean, I don't know where that stereotype necessarily comes from, but I'm sure you guys find it defamatory in the same way that I think that being identified as one of these very leftist, far out people isn't representative of where I'm coming from,
Right. But that's where the whole thing about how it's the individual that we need to focus on as opposed to the group, because it's the group that makes every person blind to what the true people within the group really are. That's what it is, because it's this has been the recurring theme. The squeaky wheel that gets the grease is the wrong squeaky wheel. It's the insanity that is getting the larger voice. So now let's flip it around and get into the next question, which is, let's talk about some of these conservative views that are getting attacked. Things like religion. And of course, there's the big war on abortion. There's the whole thing with gun rights. The fact that the education system is not teaching civics anymore. I mean, I just want to say something before I forget this. What I would love to know more in regards to my government is I want to know where my tax dollars are going. And what I would love to do is I would love for there to be a public forum where the average person gets to say, here are my main concerns. Forget about the stupid Gallup polls. I don't trust the polls anymore. Here's where I want my tax dollars to go to: infrastructure, mental health research, prison reform. That's just the tip of the iceberg, because and here's my attitude on guns. I am pro Second Amendment, but I seriously believe that people need to go through strict background checks, especially our bravest who have come back from overseas. They are suffering. Our veterans are suffering. A lot of them have PTSD or what PTSD. I'm sorry that I want to make sure I said that right. But that's why, yes, we appreciate the service that they've done. And the same could even be said down to the average police officer or firefighter. They deal with so much trauma. We have to invest more money in mental health because this is something that we are researching a lot more and we're finding more causes, but we're not finding any solutions. So it's not the war on guns. It's the war on the lack of education and money towards mental health research. That's the problem.
Yeah. So for someone on the right, I am a firm believer of, and this is, I think we should have, just as much as I think the left should have their ideology not necessarily attacked but challenged, I think the right absolutely should. I think there is a place for discussion amongst, things like guns, of course, and mental health. So I'm one of these weird people. I welcome the challenge. If as long as both sides on the right and the left could come to terms to agree that we're not trying to eradicate each other. And I feel like that's a kind of a weird point that we're at right now, is where we're trying to eradicate the left or eradicate the right. And personally, as someone who is more right-leaning, more conservative, I would not want to live in a world where there is no liberals or there's no even crazy leftists. There's no people pushing the issues, even issues I disagree with, because the conversation gets going. To Jeremy's point, like as long as the conversation's being had, the way to beat bad ideas is with better ideas.
Agreed.
And so I do like that. I do see a weird war on religion, and this is coming from someone who don't know what I am right now. I guess I'm probably leaning into being Christian possibly at times, but definitely was an atheist for the majority of my life. But I do see this weird attacking. But on the flip side of that, I would be lying if I said I didn't see religious people who also do the same attacking on other lifestyles, such as gay people or atheists. And I'm a firm believer of you're allowed to be in any form of religion, and more power to you. You're also allowed to be an atheist, and more power to you. And we can all coexist. There's no reason why we can't coexist, as long as either ideology is not directly shutting down the rights of the other person. So I don't think an atheist who brings in their ideology should shut down religious rights. I don't think a religious person should shut down atheist rights. I'm just using this as an example, and I think the answer to that is ultimately smaller government, because as government grows, one ideology is going to have to stump out another's rights, because we are making stuff that is overextended into people's lives.
Yeah, before Jeremy starts, I actually want to bring up a very important current event that took place when it came to the war on religion. And I believe it was in Colorado, the baker with the gay couple. And one of the few things that I was so angry about was how the left-wing media portrayed the story. They left out one of the more crucial pieces of the whole thing. This gentleman was willing to sell them a product from his bakery. He just said to them, I will not make this one specific cake. Now, should he have said, here's a list of local bake shops that would be more than willing to cater to their needs? Maybe it wouldn't have been a three-ring media circus if he would have said something like that. But the point that I'm making here is that he wasn't trying to refuse their business because they were a gay couple. He just did not want to make that one specific cake for them. And that is why the Supreme Court ruled in his favor. He has the religious liberty, and he wasn't being discriminatory. And I'm really upset that one piece of the story is not being portrayed. You literally had to listen to the Ben Shapiro show to find out that little tidbit that changed the story completely in a completely different manner.
I'm curious to hear Jeremy's take. I think I might be a little more liberal on some of this stuff. I'm very curious to hear Jeremy's take on that specific issue.
I would like to hear Jeremy, yeah.
I'll hit that one quick. and then I'll backtrack into the other stuff. I think that is extremely fine line between that and something like refusing a black person coming in and buying a cake. I think, okay, freedom of religion. So now we can say it's against my religion to serve blank, Okay, not to serve. I'll still sell you a cake, but it's against my principles to write anything about you being homosexual in it. Or did they request a big giant dick for a cake? I mean,
that's the thing. We don't know. And that's why we really can't come up to a 100% guaranteed conclusion.
That's lawyer talk. That's not real. That is straight up lawyer talk. That is exclusion of whatever the basic, because yeah, you're right. It could be that they wanted a big giant sniz for a cake, but more likely it was, I now pronounce you wife and wife, Linda and Claire, or whatever the thing was. And his religion, and I understand because religion is like that. They have rules and they want to abide by those rules to save their eternal souls. So what is the laws of man when it comes to the eternity in the lake of fire, right? I understand that, but for me, that's kind of the negative side of religion, is that it is exclusionary in a lot of places, and I don't think that's the teachings of Jesus. And I understand, not all faiths in Hebrew and things like that. Jesus isn't the Messiah. So it's different for different people, but I believe if you are a Christian, then you really need to keep track of the New Testament and stop being so eye for an eye, because a lot of the things that Christians claim to practice, they don't implement it into their own lives, unfortunately.
No, you're not wrong at all. And again, that's where I always say, even in the concept of religion, there needs to really be, you got to really weed out the abusers of the system.
Real quick, to just touch on what Jeremy said, I think me and Jeremy probably agree a lot more on the cake situation. This is one way where it's weird. This is a thing where sometimes rights come into contact with other people's rights. These people absolutely had a right to their religion. However, I kind of fall more along the lines with Jeremy, where it really worries me, because it's a fine line from not accepting someone who I don't know, if someone wants a cake for their Muslim faith or something like that, they could also say that, and that really bothers me too. Or serving a black person saying, well, I'll give you this pre-made cake, but or even me and my wife, hey, I for whatever reason don't agree with interracial marriage, I'll sell you a cake, but I'm not making a cake top for a black woman and a white man. And that really bothered me. I ultimately do think the Supreme Court probably made the right decision, but I don't know, because I do, the capitalist in me says vote with your wallet, boycott this business, do not shop at this business. I know I personally would not go into this business because it does not support my personal values as someone who is pro-gay marriage. I think that's the way to do it. And eventually this ideology will be stamped out in this way of thinking. But that being said, we could have said the same thing about the civil rights movement, but that was something that that ideology of racism would have been stamped out eventually. But that's one of those places where I do fall a little more on the left. I think it kind of the civil rights movement was an instance where we needed government to step in and say, no, you're no longer allowed to do this.
Yeah, I'll throw out the lawyer talk again. I based on everything that I was looking at, because I was very curious to see how this case specifically was going to go down. I think the reason why he won was because of the fact that he wasn't refusing their service. He was going to sell them something. So like Jeremy said, whatever the hell that cake was supposed to be, like I personally feel that that's what I want to know. I want to know, because
also
he wasn't refusing service.
Also, too, I don't know if you guys know this, that couple went to a ton of different bakeries before who didn't refuse them service before, looking for a Christian bakery to refuse them service. So there's also that wrinkle to the story as well.
I think I heard that as well. Lawyer talk, but it is protected by the Constitution. Like, that guy didn't really break the law. I just do believe that everybody's entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mm-hmm. But sometimes those rules do bump up against each other. Like Caleb said, I think that's the important thing to denote, is as long as you're not infringing with the rights and the pursuit of happiness for other people, then you should be protected. And I think that's probably pretty libertarian, but I think that's that's also pretty fair. It's like you do you, whatever that thing is, you be as freaky as you want to be, as long as you're not hurting anybody. You know what I mean? And that's what I really, at the end of the day, is that like I have complex feelings about the gun control issue. Abortion, I pretty much say I have the specific school of thought that consciousness is the self-awareness. You are conscious when you are aware. And I know that that's kind of, psychologist talk. I know that that's not like people believe in souls, things that are outside of my scope of reality. You know, I can't speak to those things, but in my personal experience, I don't think that if you're not aware, then you're not really, granted, it's way different to kill an infant than it is somebody that's, than to take a fetus out of somebody. I do believe that, obviously. But I don't think that anybody should be pro-abortion, just pro-choice, the ability to decide. I think that
yes,
that's
absolutely. I just feel that, you know what? I don't even want to, because I know that my words are going to get twisted. I know my words are going to get twisted.
I think I know where you're
We'll talk about it off camera.
Yeah, of course. And the gun control thing I have a really hard time with, because I grew up in an area where people hunt. I also think that what you said, I wanted to mention this earlier, your idea about putting money into mental health and the prison reform, the things that you said are things that I 100% agree with. And I think all of those things are super important and super relevant. Guns are a problem. They've already been invented. There's no way to like retcon them out of existence. People are going to end up with them, whether they're the good guys or the bad guys with the guns. There's going to be more confusion. You put more guns on the street, more people are going to get shot. You don't do thorough background checks, and you're going to end up with people with mental illness getting guns. But then those same people with mental illness can steal guns from people who are registered to own those guns. Yes, I understand it's putting up a deterrent, but this is complicated stuff. People want to act like it's black and white. I think people should be able to own guns. I think people should not be able to own assault rifles, even if it's to protect themselves from the government, because that's not what's going to end up happening. People either fetishize guns, and we fetishize the idea of being John Wayne, or like actually preventing crimes and shit. But normally we use the guns to kill the people that we're trying to protect. I'm just talking statistically. You're like, I'm going to get this gun and protect my family. And then your kid gets the gun and shoots himself or whatever. That's like way more likely to happen. And it's terrible. That said, there are lots of responsible gun owners out there. There are a lot of people that own guns that are not committing crimes with them. So
some of those respectable and responsible gun owners were people that actually stopped shootings in recent years.
Yeah, it happens. It is definitely the outlier. I do agree with that. And if you're a concealed carry person, then you are a little bit more likely to save somebody than the person that has to have it behind two locks and things like that to keep it. It's complicated. And I had a huge argument with my brother-in-law over Thanksgiving about this, because I can really see both sides of it. And my thing about the mental health is, yes, it is another great deterrent. But like the whole thing behind the Joker, this whole idea that we're all one bad day away from just completely breaking, like the movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas.
Yep. Oh man, what a wacky movie that is.
At some point, any person who doesn't have a history of mental illness, the scale can tip and that person can lose their shit.
You're not wrong. You are not wrong.
You would almost have to periodically give people mental illness or, mental health assessments. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just proposing that in addition to one screening, you might have to bring these people in at regular intervals, like an old person with a driver's license.
Right. And another thing that I really think needs to be invested in is education. The education system is such a mess right now, but it's not just improving by getting better teachers, getting better facilities. I also feel that there are some subjects that need to be taught. And I feel that could there be another conspiracy out there saying we're not going to teach young people how to be financially responsible? We're not going to teach them about civics because we want to control them? because that's one of the few things that I really feel that my education should have really done. I had to go to my father and my mother to learn about how to deal with mortgage brokers, how to balance a checkbook. I'm like, well, what if I wasn't fortunate enough to have parents? You know, unfortunately, kids lose their parents at a young age, and some of them, God, unfortunately, are in foster care. Like, how are these people going to function? They don't know these things. Yeah. I feel that they have to start teaching. There needs to be in the education system life courses. You need to learn how to live. If nobody teaches you how to live as a functioning member of society, you're going to be one of these college degree owned white kids who is out there protesting every single day because you can't get a job and you got nothing better to do with your life because you don't know how to fucking do it.
Yeah, I think balancing a checkbook and finances should be something that's taught. And I agree with you because even as someone who grew up in poverty and in a pretty rough neighborhood, you don't have as many opportunities to learn how to properly manage money when no one around you is properly managing money. You learn from the people you know. And I've retconned that and I'm still getting out of debt, but I've made some horrible financial decisions throughout my life. Luckily, in my 30s is when I was like, oh God, I need to pull my head out of my ass and start paying down debt so I can own a home and do that. But it definitely starts you at a disadvantage. And that's something that I agree 100% we should be putting money into, especially education. That's one of those few things I'm like, absolutely take my tax dollars and give it to education.
Right. I would be so much into that. Yeah.
I think that the teachers are one of the most undervalued professions in the country. I mean,
yeah. I'm sorry for cutting you off, Jeremy.
No,
I'm sorry.
You're good.
What I was saying was, as the husband of a teacher, she's the one that should be making the six-figure salary, not someone that is just a data analyst. And I am okay if my wife was the primary breadwinner because, yeah, I mean, teachers are not just people who are teaching. They're nurses, they're babysitters, they're guidance counselors, they're parents. These people do a lot of things that parents these days are not doing for their kids, and yet they're still undervalued as shit. It's terrible.
And then unfortunately, I think that the curriculum at schools is so geared towards the lowest common denominator of just getting people through this system that people like me that were a little bit higher IQ, like I was in it until I actually had to put in effort sometime in college or something. And then it was actually a struggle, but it was like up until that, I never had to do the legwork. I never had to go home and do the homework. I just came in and passed the tests, and I always did well because up to a certain point, it was just information that I had acquired from somewhere. And then I actually get into, not advanced, but higher courses and things later on. And I'm like, holy crap, I don't just know this stuff. So I do think that there's something to be said about the fact that every single type of person is going through the exact same curriculum. And I don't think that that is helpful for so many different types of learners, so many people that take in information different ways, whether it be visual or audible or, hands-on or whatever the thing is that they respond the best to.
Okay, so then we'll get into the other question. We've still got 15 minutes left. I think we're actually going to get everything done on time. I'm very happy about this. The next question is, I'm sorry?
I said, just give me a chance. I'll run this thing.
Yeah, I was like, we'll do that so quick.
Shall we do this again next year then?
Absolutely, it's been fun.
Hell, I'll go on to your show and we'll talk more about these topics. I'd love to be on your show at some point. But anyway, the next thing I want to ask you guys is about the fact that politics has basically bled into everything. It's taken over movies. It's taken over, for God's sake, it's gotten into sports. Oh my goodness. Is it necessary? Hollywood basically telling you how to live your life. And two of the most controversial topics that everybody's talking about is diversity, racism in old movies and television shows. Like now, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is classified as horrible. Charlie Brown Thanksgiving is now racist. And one of the other things that I think Hollywood has, and just politics going into entertainment, is a horrible thing, is the war on men. The Time's Up movement has turned into such a mutant right now. We've gotten to the point, especially in the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, that it's now guilty until proven innocent. And I don't want to go into the Kavanaugh case. I will just blatantly say this. Something happened to Dr. Ford. I know it. I believe that she was hurt. But was it him? I don't think so.
Well, the guy did come out and say that. Did you hear in the FBI report? A guy came out and said, "Oh, actually, that's my story. I remember me and Ford went to a party together, and my friend jumped on the bed. He's like, I didn't rape her. We made out, but I don't know. I don't know this person's life. We actually did a whole episode about it.
The point is, the three of us in this room. Yes, we are three straight white men. We're all married to wonderful women, and yet we treat our wives with respect.
Speak for yourself.
Do we argue? Are we at each other's throats? Yes. But do I ever regret the day that I exchanged vows with my wife? I would never change anything in a million years. She is my perfect match, and I don't know where I would be today if it wasn't for her. But because of what I look like, according to Hollywood, according to the mainstream media, I'm the devil in fucking carnage.
I don't know, man. Are you really though? Are you really? I like this is me playing both sides. But Hollywood isn't real. Hollywood is made up of a bunch of people. Some of them are smart, some of them are dumb. LA's got a whole lot of different kinds of people in it. But yeah, anybody with a microphone can have an opinion now. Look at us. You know what I mean? Like anybody with a microphone can have an opinion. And yes, when you watch the Oscars, it gets gross. It's a bunch of out of touch white liberals going up there and touching on so many things that they're out of reach of. These problems don't affect these people, yet they're the ones that champion the issues the most. That said, it's good that people bring attention to it. I hate the idea that that the Me Too and the Time's Up movement have become mutant, because it's important that women are heard. But yes, it's now gotten to the point that an allegation is enough to destroy somebody's livelihood. It has also gotten to where all of a sudden the rules have changed. The rules have changed. Can we go back and penalize people that played the game differently before the rules were established? I mean, obviously sexual assault was always sexual assault. You can't physically force yourself upon somebody, but like smacking chicks on the asses when they walk by, that didn't used to be that big of a problem. Like it was probably always frowned on. Nobody wanted to get hit in the butt, but they were just like, there goes that dickhead. And now it's like enough to like, you can lose your career over it. It's insane. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's like I've said this to, and in my line of work, I have a staff. I work with a staff that is predominantly female.
Yeah.
It's like when I see one of my female coworkers and she actually is wearing a nice outfit, or she actually has an amazing looking pair of shoes, I'm terrified to say I like your outfit, because I'm saying that as someone who likes the way the outfit looks. I like the outfit. If my wife had that dress or had those pair of shoes, I'd love the dress even more. I'd love the shoes even more. But that is looked at as sexual assault now.
I don't know, Caleb. Is that looked at as sexual assault now?
Unfortunately, I do think it is. I think the Time's Up and Me Too movement is started from a good perspective. I think there's still a lot of value in it. Like every other movement, considering like every movement, like it's the extremists who seem to hijack and weaponize movements.
Yes.
And even politicize them, because I don't think this is a political issue.
I agree. I don't know how treating women with respect is a political left or right issue. I don't know how it's become that. My thing is, perfect example, speaking to what you just said, Steve, I was a boss, and I remember there was, right when all this was going on, I was in jewelry. I had a couple of female staffers who worked underneath me. One of the girls was having some problems, and she was crying in the back of the room. And normally my instinct would be like, oh my God, are you okay? And hug her. Not because I'm some pervert. I would do that to one of my male staffers if they were like bawling in the back, just because I'm a caring, nurturing person. I literally was like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, take 5 minutes, come back out when you're ready. And that's like such a dickhead thing for me to do. But because I was so terrified to even be consoling or that. And now me and this girl are friends even outside of work. So, but even then I just so terrified. I'm not going to hug someone or because unfortunately, I think 99.999% of all these women, if you give them a hug, if they're crying, are going to be normal. But all it takes is one who feels a little weird about it, especially now that I got my gross pervy mustache. It's probably not going to help the situation.
You're rocking at Barcelona. You're rocking it. There we go. I knew it was going to come out.
You got it in eventually.
I got it in there. Go see Bohemian Rhapsody, folks. It's an amazing movie.
But I don't know. I feel like as far as like politics being involved in everything, I'm not one of these people who says that there shouldn't be politics and stuff. If you want to write something about politics and you want to make a movie about politics, more power to you. I love The Shape of Water. It is very directly against my politics. It is a beautiful, brilliant, beautiful film, and I think he should have every right. My problem is I saw someone recently saying that not having a stance on politics or not being political is in itself a political standpoint. And there's some people who just don't want their movie to be about liberal or conservative views. They just want to make a cool monster movie. I mean, you saw A Quiet Place get held as this like big conservative movie and get attacked for A Quiet Place being a conservative movie. And I'm like, it's a monster movie. It was not it was made by liberals. It wasn't intentionally a conservative movie. They were not going for that.
Yeah, I was really sad about that. How dare you insult Jim? Do not insult Jim.
Oh, good, man. It's nothing sacred anymore. Dude, I know we got to wrap it up soon, but when I see a girl crying in the break room at work, I walk up to her, I look her dead in the eyes, and I grab her by the pussy.
I don't know. I just hope that one day people are actually going to realize that we just have to stop getting these extremists to basically hijack everything that is really trying to fight for a good cause. And I really feel that we answered the question for the last question of the day, and that is, do you guys feel that we are ever going to finally unite as a nation? And how do we do it? By allowing each other to hold the values that we all respectively as individuals hold dear. Can we do it? I think we can, because look at what we're doing right now. Look at what we just did for 2 hours.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to think that eventually we will be able to put on one hand, I want to say that the system is structured in such a way that there's always going to be a division between us. But despite that division, we should all be able to at least approach the line and come to some sort of, understanding that at the end of the day, we're all pretty much the same.
Not me. I'm above everyone else. That's how I feel.
Yeah, you can't all be as cool as you can.
No, I agree. I think we could get to a point where we have civil conversations. I think it's going to take a big cultural shift. I think the media specifically, I think political figures specifically, we talked about Maxine Waters and Trump. I think we all need to tone down the rhetoric, which I do see on mainly platforms like YouTube. Conversations like this are way more common than they used to be, when people aren't fighting for a 10-minute sound clip on a show on Fox News or CNN where they literally have 10 seconds to speak each, who can get the quickest burn in. As that type of media slowly dies and independent media slowly grows up, I think you will get to a more balanced middle. I really think that I see the middle growing. I see all the groundwork being laid for a more moderate middle ground.
Right. I agree. I mean, at this point in time, as someone who likes to take a look at what the mainstream media talks about, I feel at this point in time, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw Sean Hannity wearing a tinfoil hat on his show one day. I really think he is starting to lose his mind. But that's just me. I mean, I feel that we need more people. I think we need more voices like Tucker Carlson in the media, because what I really appreciate about him is that he wants the other side unfortunately, I think he shows them in a negative light, but I have to say you have to give him credit for at least getting these people on the show, because I think what he's trying to do is he wants to weed out the crazies so the other side can actually find the sane people on the other side and start a conversation, start a dialogue, and dare I say it, find common ground and maybe even create a friendship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we do have 5 minutes left, but I do want to basically tell everybody in the comments, thank you all so much. Devin from Indian Insomniac just showed up, and he's so upset that he actually showed up now. He wished that he came in earlier.
Good timing.
But just in case, everybody, this video is going to be taken down to later today so I can edit it and add an intro and outro, and it will be back up on my channel in full capacity on Monday, December the 3rd at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you can watch it whenever you like, and I will be giving this file to Caleb and Jeremy so they can put it on the People Are Terrible channel or maybe on their own individual channels. But what I want to ask the both of you guys is, there's still so much to talk about here. Is there any way that at some point in the near future we can continue this conversation, whether it's on one whole show or in increments? I would love to be on your show one day and talk more about these things, because I do have a lot to say about the war on plastic straws.
We'll see.
We never even tackled it.
We definitely need to have you on, and we'd love to be back on as well. Be prepared for like more stupid topics on ours half the time, because I think we talked about dumb names on this week's upcoming episode. So we really tackle the hard issues.
I guess if you think Absidy is a dumb name, then we talked about dumb names.
Well, one of the things since I did bring up the environment, my attitude about the environment is we can't immediately go to plan B until we're absolutely certain that plan B works. But until then, we have to unfortunately stick with plan A regardless of what it's doing until we are absolutely sure that the new plan, the safer plan, that it can work. I don't know when we'll actually ever get to a reusable energy system. I think that we can do it, but again, I think that that's all about people just not wanting to change and stuff like that. But anyway, everybody, from the bottom of my heart, I want to say to each and every one of you that watched today and actually watched all 12 episodes of my brand new show, Sunday Sit Downs, this year, it has been a true blessing to have actually put this together, managed to get this off the ground, and make it as successful as it is right now. And I am so excited to see you guys again next year for 12 new topics, 12 great topics of discussion, and even more importantly, a whole bunch of additional YouTubers to discuss it with, because this is the first time that I have actually done a show with more than one guest, and my goodness, did it work. Everybody got their piece in. I'm sorry, gentlemen, if I actually jumped in while you both were talking. I just wanted to do it in support as well as just feed the fire just a little bit to get the conversation a little bit more going and getting a little bit more detail in. But you both have been fantastic. It was such a pleasure to have you both. So everybody, thank you all for watching, and all of their social media will be down in the description box when it goes back up tomorrow morning. But in the meantime, everybody, have a wonderful and safe holiday weekend wherever you are with your friends and family, and let's all just keep talking and keep the conversation going. And I will see you all next year. Have a great day, everybody. Hey, thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. If you're new here and want to see more of what my channel has to offer, please click on the link to my last video or hit that subscribe button to be kept up to date with all of my uploads. Content of all sorts is posted here quite often, so trust me, you do not want to fall behind. I will see you in the comments, and actions speak louder than words.